Mother Bear howled for help. Outside Pediatrics at midnight, what happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight as Nurse Riley Chen walked down the quiet hallway of Pine Valley Pediatric Center. Her soft-soled shoes barely made a sound on the polished floor. The night shift always felt different here. During the day, this place buzzed with crying babies, worried parents, and the constant chatter of medical staff. But now, at this hour, it was just her, the sleeping children in their rooms, and the gentle hum of machines keeping watch over tiny hearts. Riley had been working nights for 3 years now. She chose this shift because she loved the peace it brought. Most nights, she would check on her young patients, update their charts, and maybe catch a few minutes to read a book during the quiet hours. Tonight felt no different as she made her rounds, adjusting blankets and checking IV drips. The pediatric center sat at the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to thick forest. During the day, you could hear birds singing and see squirrels running between the trees. At night, the forest became a wall of darkness that seemed to press against the windows. Riley had always found it calming, but tonight something felt different. She was walking past the main entrance when she heard it. A sound that made her stop dead in her tracks. It was low, deep, and filled with pain. Not the cry of a child or the call of a night bird. This was something else entirely. The sound came again, louder this time. Riley moved toward the glass doors of the entrance, her heart starting to beat faster. The parking lot outside was empty except for her old Honda and the security guard's truck. The streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, but everything looked normal. Then she saw movement near the tree line. A massive shape was moving in the darkness, just beyond the reach of the parking lot lights. Riley pressed her face against the glass, trying to see better. The shape moved again, and this time she could make out what it was. A bear. A huge black bear was standing at the edge of the parking lot. Riley's breath caught in her throat. She had lived in this mountain town her whole life, and had seen bears before, but always from a distance. They usually stayed in the forest, only coming near town when they were looking for food in garbage cans. But this bear wasn't near any trash. It was just standing there, looking directly at the hospital. The bear took a step forward into the light. Riley could see it clearly now. It was enormous, probably weighing over 300 pounds, with thick black fur that seemed to absorb the light around it. But what made Riley's heart skip was what she saw next to the bear. A small shape lay on the ground beside the massive animal. At first, Riley thought it might be a rock or a fallen branch, but then she saw it move slightly. It was a bear cub, much smaller than its mother, and it wasn't moving much at all. The mother bear turned her head toward the cub, then back toward the hospital. She opened her mouth and let out another cry, this one even more heartbreaking than the first. It wasn't the roar of an angry bear. It was the sound of a mother in pain, calling for help. Riley stepped back from the glass, her mind racing. This couldn't be happening. Wild animals didn't come to hospitals for help. They avoided humans, especially when they had cubs to protect. But, as she watched, the mother bear did something that made Riley's breath catch in her throat. The bear picked up her cub gently in her mouth and carried it closer to the hospital entrance. She set the little one down on the pavement just a few feet from the glass doors. The cub barely moved, and Riley could see that something was terribly wrong with it. The mother bear sat down next to her baby and looked directly at Riley through the glass. Their eyes met, and Riley felt something pass between them. The bear's eyes weren't wild or threatening. They were filled with desperation, with the same look Riley had seen in the eyes of countless parents who had brought their sick children to this very hospital. The bear was asking for help. Riley's hands were shaking as she reached for her phone to call security, but as she started to dial, the bear made another sound. This time, it was softer, almost like a whimper. The cub tried to lift its head but couldn't manage it. Riley could see now that there was something dark on the ground around the little bear. Blood. The mother bear looked at Riley again, then at her cub, then back at Riley. The message was clear. Her baby was dying, and she had nowhere else to turn. Riley had never felt her heart break and race at the same time before. Every instinct told her to stay inside, to call for help, to let someone else handle this impossible situation. But another part of her, the part that had made her choose nursing as her career, was already reaching for her medical bag. The bear cub needed help, and sometimes help came from the most unexpected places. Riley stood frozen for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Her medical bag sat on the nearby counter, filled with supplies she used for her pediatric patients. Bandages, antiseptic, pain medication, things that might help a wounded animal if she was brave enough to try. The mother bear made another soft sound, almost like she was talking to her cub. Riley watched as the massive animal gently nudged the little one with her nose, trying to get a response. The cub's breathing was shallow and rapid. Even from inside the building, Riley could see the rise and fall of its tiny chest was uneven. She picked up her phone again, but this time, instead of calling security, she hesitated. What would they do? Call animal control? By the time anyone arrived, it might be too late for the cub. And what if they scared the mother bear away? The little one was too weak to be moved far. Riley made a decision that surprised even herself. She grabbed her medical bag and moved toward the door. But just as she reached for the handle, she heard footsteps behind her. "Riley? What are you doing up here?" She turned to see Marcus Webb, the night security guard, walking toward her with a confused expression. Marcus was in his 50s, a kind man who had worked at the hospital for over a decade. He treated the night staff like family and always had a thermos of coffee to share. "Marcus," Riley whispered, not wanting to startle the bears outside. "You need to see this, but please be quiet." Marcus approached the glass doors and immediately stepped back when he saw the bears. "Jesus Christ, Riley, get away from there." He reached for his radio. "I'm calling the police right now." "Wait," Riley grabbed his arm. "Look at the cub, Marcus. Really look at it." Marcus reluctantly stepped closer to the glass again. The mother bear watched them both but didn't move away. She seemed to understand that they were discussing her situation. The cub hadn't moved at all in the past few minutes. "That little one is dying," Riley said softly. "The mother brought it here for help. She's not being aggressive. She's begging." Marcus stared out at the scene, his hand still on his radio. "Riley, that's a wild bear. A mother bear with a cub. Do you know how dangerous this is? They attack when they feel threatened." "But she's not attacking," Riley pointed out. "She's been out there for at least 10 minutes, and she hasn't tried to break in or hurt anyone. She's just sitting with her baby, asking for help." As if to prove Riley's point, the mother bear lay down next to her cub and began gently licking its fur. The gesture was so tender, so human-like in its maternal care, that both Riley and Marcus fell silent. "I've never seen anything like this," Marcus whispered. "In all my years here, I've never seen a wild animal act like this." Riley opened her medical bag and started pulling out supplies. "I'm going out there." "Are you insane?" Marcus grabbed her arm. "Riley, that bear could kill you without even trying. One swipe of her paw and you're dead." "That cub is dying, Marcus. Look at it." Riley's voice was firm but quiet. "I became a nurse to help those who can't help themselves. That little one out there is no different from the babies I care for every night." Marcus looked from Riley to the bears and back again. "This is the craziest thing anyone has ever asked me to be part of." "I'm not asking you to come with me," Riley said, checking her supplies one more time. "But I am asking you not to call for help until I try. If this goes wrong, then call everyone. But give me a chance first." The mother bear seemed to sense the discussion happening inside. She stood up and took a few steps toward the glass, then looked back at her cub. The message was clear. Time was running out. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the scene outside. Finally, he sighed deeply. "My daughter is a veterinarian," he said quietly. "She's helped injured wildlife before. She always says that animals know when someone is trying to help them." Riley looked at him hopefully. "If you're really going to do this insane thing," Marcus continued, "then I'm calling Sarah. She lives 20 minutes away and she might know what to do for a bear cub." "Thank you," Riley whispered, feeling a rush of gratitude. Marcus pulled out his personal phone and dialed. While he spoke quietly to his daughter, Riley continued preparing her supplies. She had antiseptic, gauze, medical tape, and some pain medication that might work on a small animal. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. "Sarah's on her way," Marcus said, hanging up. "She said to try to keep the cub stable until she gets here, but Riley—" He paused, looking seriously at her. "She also said that mother bears are unpredictable. Even if this one seems calm now, she could change in an instant if she thinks you're hurting her baby." Riley nodded, understanding the risk. She moved to the door and slowly turned the handle. The night air was cold against her face as she stepped outside. The mother bear immediately turned her attention to Riley, watching every movement with intense focus. Riley took a slow step forward, speaking in the softest voice she could manage. "Hi there, Mama. I see your baby is hurt. I want to help." The bear tilted her head slightly, as if she was actually listening to Riley's words. This close, Riley could see just how massive the animal was. Standing on all fours, the bear's head came up to Riley's chest. If she stood on her hind legs, she would tower over Riley completely, but the bear didn't stand. Instead, she looked down at her cub, then back at Riley. She took a small step back, creating space between Riley and the injured baby. Riley's heart was pounding so hard she was sure the bear could hear it. She knelt down about 3 feet away from the cub and got her first clear look at the injury. The little bear was covered in blood along its left side. There was a deep gash that looked like it might have come from another animal's claws or teeth. The wound was serious, and the cub had lost a lot of blood. Its breathing was getting weaker by the minute. "Oh, sweetheart," Riley whispered, both to the cub and to its mother. "This is bad, but we can help." The mother bear made a soft sound, almost like she was answering Riley. Then she did something that made Riley's breath catch in her throat. The massive bear moved closer and gently nudged her cub toward Riley with her nose. She was giving permission. Riley's hands were shaking as she opened her medical bag, but her voice remained steady. "Okay, Mama, I'm going to take care of your baby now." But just as Riley reached toward the cub with an antiseptic wipe, a new sound cut through the night air. Car engines. Multiple vehicles were approaching fast, and they were getting closer. The mother bear's head shot up, her ears alert. The calm, trusting animal from just seconds before was gone, replaced by a wild creature sensing danger. She positioned herself between Riley and the approaching sounds, a low growl rumbling in her throat. Riley looked back toward the hospital and saw Marcus in the window, gesturing frantically. He was pointing down the road, and his expression was one of panic. Through the trees, Riley could see flashing lights, red and blue lights. The police were coming, and they were coming fast. The mother bear looked at the lights, then at her cub, then at Riley. In that moment, Riley saw a decision being made in the bear's eyes. The wild animal was calculating whether to trust the human who was trying to help or to grab her baby and run from the approaching danger. Riley knew that the next few seconds would determine whether the cub lived or died, and whether she herself would survive this incredible night. The flashing lights were getting brighter, and Riley could hear the rumble of multiple engines now. The mother bear's protective instincts were kicking in, and she began to pace back and forth in front of her cub, blocking Riley's access. Her earlier calm was disappearing as the perceived threat grew closer. "It's okay, Mama," Riley whispered, trying to keep her voice steady even though her heart was racing. Those people might be coming to help too. But even as she said the words, Riley wasn't sure she believed them. Police officers weren't trained to handle injured wildlife, and their first priority would be public safety. They would probably try to drive the bears away, and the cub was too weak to survive being moved. The mother bear suddenly stopped pacing and looked directly at Riley. For a moment, their eyes met again, and Riley saw something that made her chest tighten with emotion. The bear was making a choice, and Riley could see the internal struggle in those dark, intelligent eyes. Then the bear did something that would stay with Riley for the rest of her life. She walked over to her cub, picked it up gently in her mouth, and placed it directly in front of Riley. The little bear was so close now that Riley could feel its shallow breathing against her hands. The mother bear then positioned herself between Riley and the approaching vehicles, but this time she wasn't protecting her cub from Riley. She was protecting both Riley and her baby from whatever was coming down that road. Riley didn't waste the gift she had been given. She immediately began cleaning the cub's wound with antiseptic. The little bear whimpered softly, but didn't struggle. It was too weak to fight, which worried Riley even more. She worked quickly, her nursing training taking over as she assessed the damage. The wound was deep, but it had missed any major organs. The bleeding had mostly stopped, which was good news. The cub was suffering more from blood loss and shock than from the injury itself. Riley began wrapping the wound with gauze, her hands steady despite the surreal situation. "You're going to be okay, little one," she whispered to the cub. "Your mama brought you to the right place." The police cars were close enough now that Riley could see their headlights cutting through the darkness. The mother bear stood firm, watching the approaching vehicles with the intensity of a soldier guarding something precious. Marcus appeared at the hospital door, speaking loudly enough for Riley to hear. "Riley, the police are here. They're asking about reports of a dangerous animal." Riley's stomach dropped. Someone had called this in as a dangerous animal situation. The police would be prepared for an aggressive bear, not a mother seeking help for her injured baby. "Tell them to approach slowly," Riley called back, not taking her eyes off the cub. "Tell them the bear isn't aggressive." But it was too late. The first police car pulled into the parking lot with its spotlight blazing, illuminating the entire scene. The bright light hit the mother bear directly, and she reacted instinctively to what she perceived as an attack. The bear reared up on her hind legs, standing nearly 8 feet tall, and let out a roar that echoed off the hospital walls. She was no longer the gentle mother who had asked for help. She was a wild animal protecting her territory and her young. Riley threw herself over the cub, shielding the little bear with her own body as she continued to work on its wound. "Don't shoot!" she screamed toward the police cars. "She's protecting her baby." 2 officers had gotten out of their vehicles, and Riley could see they had their hands on their weapons. The situation was escalating rapidly, and Riley knew that any sudden movement could turn deadly. "Ma'am, get away from those animals immediately." one of the officers shouted through a megaphone. "You're in extreme danger." The mother bear dropped back down to all fours, but remained positioned between Riley and the police. She was growling now, a low, threatening sound that made Riley's skin crawl despite knowing the bear was trying to protect her. "I'm a nurse," Riley shouted back. "The cub is injured and needs medical attention. The mother bear brought it here for help." Riley could see the officers talking to each other, probably trying to figure out if she was crazy or telling the truth. The situation was unlike anything they had probably ever encountered. Then another vehicle pulled up, and Riley's heart leaped with hope. It was an older pickup truck, and a woman with short gray hair was getting out. She moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was dealing with. "That's my daughter, Sarah," Marcus called out to the officers. "She's a veterinarian." Sarah Webb approached the scene carefully, speaking in a calm, authoritative voice. "Officers, I need you to turn off your spotlight and lower your weapons. The bear is exhibiting protective behavior, not aggressive behavior. The bright lights are making her feel threatened." "Ma'am, there's a civilian in immediate danger," one of the officers replied. "We need to neutralize the threat." "The only threat here is escalation," Sarah said firmly. "That bear could have attacked the nurse at any time in the past 20 minutes, but she hasn't. She's asking for help." Sarah slowly walked closer to the scene, and Riley could see her assessing the situation with professional eyes. The mother bear watched Sarah approach but didn't react aggressively. Something about Sarah's calm demeanor seemed to communicate that she was there to help. "Riley, how's the cub?" Sarah asked softly. "Stable, for now," Riley replied, still working on the wound. "Deep laceration, significant blood loss, but it missed the vital organs. The bleeding has stopped, but it needs more care than I can give here." Sarah nodded and turned to the officers. "We need to get this cub to my clinic. It's going to die without proper medical treatment." "And how exactly do you propose we do that with a 300-pound bear standing guard?" one of the officers asked. That's when Riley heard another sound that made her blood run cold. More engines, more vehicles approaching. But these weren't police cars. The sound was different, heavier, more industrial. Through the trees, Riley could see new lights approaching. Not the red and blue of police cars, but the harsh white of work lights. A truck was coming, and from the sound of it, it was big. Marcus ran out from the hospital, his face pale with panic. "Riley, animal control is coming. They got a call about a bear attack." The mother bear seemed to understand that the danger was increasing. She moved closer to Riley and her cub, and Riley could feel the animal's warm breath on her neck as the bear positioned herself like a living shield. "They're going to tranquilize her," Sarah said grimly. "And once they do, they'll take both bears away. The cub won't survive the stress of capture and transport in its current condition." Riley looked down at the little bear in her arms. Its breathing was steadier now, and she could feel its tiny heart beating against her chest. She had formed a bond with this helpless creature, and the thought of losing it now was unbearable. "There has to be another way," Riley said desperately. The animal control truck was getting closer, and Riley could see that it was followed by another vehicle. As the second truck came into the light, Riley's heart sank. It was a news van with a satellite dish on top and a logo on the side. Someone had called the media. The mother bear saw the new vehicles and let out another roar, this one even more desperate than the first. She was surrounded now, with no clear escape route, and her maternal instincts were telling her to fight. Sarah moved closer to Riley and the bears, speaking urgently. "The media is going to turn this into a circus, and animal control is going to want to take charge of the situation. We need to act fast." "What can we do?" Riley asked, feeling helpless. Sarah pulled out her phone and made a quick call. Tom? It's Sarah Webb. I need you to meet me at the Pine Valley Pediatrics Center right now. Bring the portable surgery unit and all the blood we have for small mammals. She paused, listening. Yes, I know what time it is. Just trust me on this one. She hung up and looked at Riley. My partner's bringing equipment. We're going to treat the cub right here, right now. In the parking lot? Riley asked. It's the only way. If we can stabilize the cub completely, prove that it's going to survive, then we might be able to convince everyone to let the mother take it back into the forest. The animal control truck pulled into the parking lot, and Riley could see officers getting out with tranquilizer guns and nets. The media van parked right behind them, and a reporter with a cameraman was already setting up to film the scene. This was about to become a public spectacle, and Riley realized that the most beautiful, heartbreaking moment of her life was about to be destroyed by people who didn't understand what was really happening here. The mother bear seemed to sense the growing threat. She moved even closer to Riley and her cub, and for the first time since this all began, Riley felt truly afraid. Not of the bear, but of what all these other people might do to this family that had asked for nothing more than help. But then the cub in Riley's arms made a soft sound, almost like a purr, and opened its eyes for the first time. The little bear looked up at Riley with dark, trusting eyes, and Riley felt her resolve strengthen. She wasn't going to let anything happen to this baby. Not after coming this far. Sarah, Riley said, her voice filled with determination. Tell me what you need me to do. Sarah quickly surveyed the chaos around them. Animal control officers were unloading their equipment, the news crew was setting up their cameras, and the police were trying to establish a perimeter. The mother bear was becoming more agitated by the minute, turning her massive head to track each new threat. First, we need to buy time, Sarah said urgently. The cub's wound is stabilized, but it needs a blood transfusion and antibiotics. Tom is bringing supplies, but he's still 15 minutes away. Riley looked down at the little bear in her arms. Its eyes were still open, watching her face with an intelligence that seemed far beyond its age. The cub's breathing was steady now, but Riley could feel how weak it still was. Ma'am. The animal control officer was approaching with his tranquilizer gun raised. He was a tall man in his 40s with a stern expression. I'm Officer Davis with Animal Control. I need you to move away from those bears immediately. This is an extremely dangerous situation. The bears aren't dangerous, Riley called back, never taking her eyes off the cub. They're asking for help. Black bears are unpredictable, especially mothers with cubs, Officer Davis replied. I've been doing this for 20 years and I've never seen behavior like this. Something's wrong with them. Sarah stepped forward, positioning herself between Officer Davis and Riley. There's nothing wrong with them except that the cub is injured and the mother is desperate. I'm Dr. Sarah Webb, and I'm telling you that tranquilizing that mother bear right now could cause her to accidentally harm the nurse and the cub. Officer Davis lowered his weapon slightly but kept it ready. Doctor, I appreciate your concern, but public safety is my priority. That bear is exhibiting aggressive behavior. She's exhibiting protective behavior, Sarah corrected firmly. Look at her body language. She's not preparing to attack. She's shielding. As if to prove Sarah's point, the mother bear moved slightly to block the harsh lights from the news camera that were now shining directly on Riley and the cub. The bear was literally using her body to shield the baby from the bright lights. The reporter, a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, was speaking into her microphone while the cameraman filmed. This is Jessica Chen, reporting live from Pine Valley Pediatrics Center, where a dramatic wildlife rescue is unfolding. A hospital nurse is currently treating an injured bear cub while its 300-pound mother stands guard. Riley's heart sank as she heard the reporter's words. Jessica Chen shared her last name, but Riley had never seen her before. The irony that someone with the same name was broadcasting her most vulnerable moment to the world wasn't lost on her. "We need to get that camera out of here," Sarah muttered. "The lights and noise are stressing the mother bear." Marcus appeared at Riley's side, carrying a large medical kit from the hospital. "I brought everything I could find," he said breathlessly. "Saline solution, more bandages, antibiotics. The hospital administrator is on her way down, too." Riley's stomach tightened. "Mrs. Patterson is coming." "She got calls from the police and the news station," Marcus explained. "She's not happy about the liability issues." Mrs. Patterson was the hospital administrator, a woman in her 60s who ran the Pediatrics Center with iron efficiency. She cared deeply about the patients, but she also worried constantly about lawsuits and insurance claims. Having a nurse treating a wild animal on hospital property would definitely fall under her list of nightmares. The mother bear suddenly tensed, her ears perking up. She was looking toward the forest, not at the people surrounding her. Riley followed her gaze and saw movement in the trees. At first, she thought it might be more bears, but then she realized what it was. People! Several figures were moving through the forest, approaching from different directions. "Sarah," Riley whispered urgently, "there are people coming through the woods." Sarah looked toward the tree line and cursed under her breath. "Probably hikers or locals who heard about this on the news. This is turning into exactly what we didn't want, a public spectacle." Officer Davis had noticed the movement too. He spoke into his radio, calling for backup to secure the area. The situation was spiraling out of control, and Riley could feel the mother bear's anxiety increasing with each new person who appeared. The cub in Riley's arms made a soft whimpering sound, and Riley looked down to see that its eyes were closing again. The little bear was exhausted from its ordeal, and the stress of all the activity around them wasn't helping. "We're losing him," Riley said quietly to Sarah. Sarah knelt down next to Riley and gently examined the cub. "His pulse is weak, and his breathing is shallow. He needs that transfusion now, not in 15 minutes. That's when they heard another vehicle approaching. This one sounded different, older, with a diesel engine that rattled and coughed. A battered pickup truck came into view, and an elderly man with a gray beard got out. "That's Dr. Tom Rodriguez," Sarah said with relief. "My partner." Tom Rodriguez looked like he belonged in the mountains more than in a veterinary clinic. He wore faded jeans, a flannel shirt, and boots that had seen decades of use. But the medical equipment he was unloading from his truck was state-of-the-art. "Sarah, what have you gotten us into?" Tom asked as he approached, carrying a portable surgery unit that looked like a high-tech briefcase. "Something incredible," Sarah replied. "This mother bear brought her injured cub to the hospital for help. The nurse has been treating it, and the mother has been protecting both of them." Tom looked at the scene. Riley kneeling with the cub, the massive mother bear standing guard, the police and animal control officers with their weapons, the news crew filming everything, and the growing crowd of onlookers. "In 30 years of veterinary practice, I've never seen anything like this," he said quietly. The mother bear watched Tom approach but didn't react aggressively. Something about his calm demeanor and the way he moved seemed to communicate that he was there to help, just like Sarah. "What do you need?" Tom asked Sarah. "Blood transfusion, antibiotics, and pain management," Sarah replied quickly. "The cub has lost a lot of blood, and it's going into shock." Tom nodded and began setting up his equipment right there on the pavement. "I brought everything we have. Let's save this little one." But just as Tom was preparing the fourth line, Mrs. Patterson arrived on the scene. She marched out of the hospital with the determination of someone who was about to put an end to whatever nonsense was happening on her property. "Riley Chen," Mrs. Patterson's voice cut through all the other noise. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" The mother bear immediately turned toward this new, loud voice, and Riley could see the animal's muscles tensing. Mrs. Patterson's aggressive tone was triggering the bear's protective instincts. "Mrs. Patterson, please keep your voice down," Riley said urgently. "The mother bear is very sensitive to threatening behavior right now." "Threatening behavior?" Mrs. Patterson's voice got even louder. "You're sitting in a parking lot with a wild bear, putting yourself and this entire hospital at risk. Get away from that animal right now." The mother bear took a step toward Mrs. Patterson, and everyone tensed. Officer Davis raised his tranquilizer gun again. The police officers put their hands on their weapons, and the news camera zoomed in to capture what might be a deadly confrontation. But then, something unexpected happened. From the crowd of people who had gathered from the forest came a voice that made everyone freeze. "Mama Bear! Mama Bear, it's okay!" A small figure broke away from the group of onlookers and ran toward the scene. It was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with pigtails and a pink jacket. She was running straight toward the mother bear. "Stop her!" Officer Davis shouted. But before anyone could react, the little girl reached the mother bear and threw her small arms around the massive animal's neck. The bear, who had been tense and ready to defend her territory just seconds before, immediately calmed down. She gently nuzzled the little girl with her nose, making soft sounds that were almost like purring. "Emma!" a man's voice called from the crowd. "Emma, get back here!" A man in his 30s came running after the little girl, panic written all over his face. "I'm sorry. She got away from me. Emma has autism and she doesn't understand danger." But as everyone watched in amazement, it became clear that Emma wasn't in any danger at all. The mother bear was being as gentle with the little girl as she was with her own cub. "She's not hurting her," Riley whispered in amazement. Emma looked up at the bear's face and spoke in a clear, confident voice. "Your baby is hurt, isn't he, Mama Bear? These nice people are going to make him all better." The little girl then turned to Riley and walked over confidently. "Can I pet the baby bear?" "I won't hurt him." Riley looked at Emma's father, who nodded reluctantly. "She has a way with animals. I've never seen anything like it." Emma gently stroked the cub's fur, and the little bear opened its eyes again, looking at the girl with the same trusting expression it had given Riley. "He's very sick," Emma said matter-of-factly, "but he's going to be okay because his mama brought him to the right place." The mother bear watched this interaction and then did something that brought tears to Riley's eyes. She walked over to Emma and gently licked the little girl's hand, as if she was thanking her for understanding. The news reporter was frantically trying to get closer to film this incredible development, but her cameraman was so amazed by what he was seeing that he had lowered his camera. "Are you getting this?" Jessica Chen whispered to her cameraman. "I don't think anyone would believe it if I wasn't filming it," he replied softly. Mrs. Patterson stood speechless, watching a scene that defied everything she thought she knew about wild animals and dangerous situations. Officer Davis slowly lowered his tranquilizer gun. "I've never seen anything like this in 20 years, he muttered. Tom and Sarah took advantage of the calm moment to continue their medical work. Tom had prepared the fourth line and was ready to start the blood transfusion. "Riley, I need you to hold the cub very still," Sarah instructed. "This is going to be delicate." As Tom inserted the tiny IV needle into the cub's leg, the mother bear watched intently. She could see that these humans were trying to help her baby, and her trust in them was growing stronger. Emma stayed close to the mother bear, continuing to pet her gently and speak to her in soft, reassuring tones. "Your baby is very brave," she told the bear, "and you're a very good mama for bringing him here." The cub's response to the blood transfusion was almost immediate. Its breathing became stronger, and its eyes became more alert. Riley could feel the little bear's strength returning as the life-giving blood flowed into its system. But just as everyone began to relax, thinking the crisis was over, a new sound cut through the night air. Howling. Wild, haunting howls coming from deep in the forest. The mother bear's head shot up, and she responded with a call of her own. But this wasn't the desperate cry for help she had been making earlier. This was different. This was communication. "What is that?" Mrs. Patterson asked nervously. Tom and Sarah exchanged worried glances. "Those are other bears," Sarah said quietly, "and they're calling to her." The mother bear looked toward the forest, then at her cub, then at Riley. She was being called by her family, but her baby wasn't ready to be moved yet. Riley could see the conflict in the bear's eyes. She was torn between two worlds: the wild forest where she belonged, and the strange human place where her cub was being saved. The howling grew louder, and Riley realized that this incredible night was far from over. The mother bear's family was coming, and no one knew what would happen when multiple wild bears arrived at the hospital. The mother bear began pacing again, but this time her movements were different. She wasn't agitated or threatened, she was conflicted. Riley could see it in the way the massive animal kept looking between the forest and her cub, between her wild family calling her home and the human family trying to save her baby. "How many bears do you think are out there?" Officer Davis asked nervously, gripping his tranquilizer gun tighter. Tom looked up from the medical equipment, his experienced ear picking up nuances in the calls that others missed. "At least 3, maybe 4. Sounds like adult bears, probably siblings or the father." Emma, still standing next to the mother bear, tilted her head as if she was listening to a conversation no one else could understand. "They're worried about her," she said simply. They want to know if she's safe." Emma's father, who had introduced himself as David Chen, no relation to Riley despite the shared name, watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. "Emma has always been able to understand animals in ways that doctors can't explain," he said quietly to Riley, "but I've never seen her interact with anything this dangerous." "She's not in danger," Riley said softly, watching as Emma continued to stroke the mother bear's thick fur. "This bear knows Emma is a friend." The cub in Riley's arms was responding well to the blood transfusion. Its eyes were brighter, and it had even tried to move its head to look around. But Sarah's examination revealed something that made Riley's heart sink. "There's internal damage," Sarah said quietly, so only Riley and Tom could hear. "The injury went deeper than we first thought. The cub needs surgery, and it needs it tonight." "Surgery?" Riley whispered. "Here?" Tom was already unpacking more equipment from his truck. "I've performed emergency surgeries in worse conditions. But Riley, this is going to take hours, and we can't do it with all these people around. The stress alone could kill the cub." Riley looked around at the chaos surrounding them. The news crew was still filming. More police cars had arrived. The crowd of onlookers was growing larger. And now there were wild bears somewhere in the forest preparing to join the scene. "We need to move this somewhere quiet," Sarah said. Mrs. Patterson, who had been listening to their conversation, stepped forward. "Absolutely not. I will not allow wild animals inside my hospital." "Then the cub will die," Tom said bluntly. "It needs immediate surgery, and it needs a sterile environment." "That's not my problem," Mrs. Patterson replied coldly. My responsibility is to the human patients and staff in this building." Riley felt anger rising in her chest. She looked down at the little bear, whose trusting eyes were still watching her face, and made a decision that would change everything. "Then I quit," Riley said quietly. Everyone stopped talking and stared at her. "I quit," Riley repeated, louder this time. "If this hospital won't help save a life, then I don't want to work here anymore." Mrs. Patterson's face turned red. "Riley, you're being emotional and irrational. You can't throw away your career over a wild animal." "This isn't just a wild animal," Riley said, her voice growing stronger. "This is a mother who trusted humans enough to ask for help when her baby was dying. This is a baby who looked at me with the same trust I see in every sick child I've ever cared for. If you can't see that, then maybe I don't belong here." Marcus stepped forward, and Riley was surprised to see tears in the older man's eyes. "If Riley quits, then I quit too," he said firmly. "I've worked here for 12 years, and I've never seen anyone show more compassion than she has tonight." "And I'll quit too," came another voice. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, one of the pediatric doctors, had come outside to see what was happening. She was still in her scrubs from working the night shift. "I became a doctor to save lives, all lives." Mrs. Patterson looked around in shock as more hospital staff began gathering behind Riley. The night shift nurses, 2 more doctors, even some of the custodial staff were nodding in agreement. "This is ridiculous," Mrs. Patterson sputtered. "You're all going to lose your jobs over a bear." "We're going to save a life," Dr. Walsh said simply. "Isn't that what hospitals are supposed to do?" The mother bear, who had been watching this human drama unfold, made a decision of her own. She walked over to Mrs. Patterson and sat down directly in front of her, looking up into the administrator's face with those same intelligent, pleading eyes that had started this whole incredible night. Mrs. Patterson stared down at the massive bear, and for a moment the parking lot was completely silent, except for the distant howling from the forest. "She's asking you personally," Emma said softly. "She wants you to understand that her baby needs help." Mrs. Patterson looked at the bear, then at the cub in Riley's arms, then at the faces of her staff who were all watching her with expectation. Riley could see the internal struggle playing out on the administrator's face. Finally, Mrs. Patterson sighed deeply. "Doctor? Walsh? What would we need to do this safely?" Dr. Walsh smiled. "We'd need to clear out operating room 3. It's on the ground floor with direct access to the parking lot. We could bring the cub in through the emergency entrance." "And the mother bear?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "She'll need to wait outside," Sarah said. "But she'll be able to see through the windows. As long as she can watch her cub, she should stay calm." Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a long moment, then she pulled out her phone. "Security, this is Mrs. Patterson. I need operating room 3 cleared and prepped for an emergency surgery." "Yes, I know what time it is. Just do it." Riley felt tears of relief streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. But their celebration was interrupted by a new development. The howling from the forest had stopped, but now they could hear something else. Branches breaking. Heavy footsteps. The other bears weren't just calling anymore. They were coming. Emma suddenly looked toward the tree line with excitement. "They're here! Papa Bear and Uncle Bears are coming to check on Mama and the baby." David Chen went pale. "Emma, we need to get you away from here right now." But Emma shook her head firmly. "No, Daddy. They need me to help them understand that the humans are friends." The first shape emerged from the forest, and Riley's breath caught in her throat. It was another black bear, even larger than the mother. This one had to weigh at least 400 pounds, with massive shoulders and a head that seemed almost too big for its body. Officer Davis raised his tranquilizer gun again. "That's it. I'm calling for backup from the State Wildlife Department. This situation is out of control." But the big male bear didn't charge or act aggressively. Instead, he approached slowly, his eyes fixed on the mother bear and her cub. When he was about 20 feet away, he sat down and made a soft, huffing sound. The mother bear responded with her own soft sound, and Riley realized she was witnessing something incredible. The bears were communicating, and the mother was explaining the situation to her mate. 2 more bears emerged from the forest, a smaller female and another male. They also approached slowly and sat down at a respectful distance, forming a semicircle around the scene. "It's the whole family," Tom whispered in amazement. "They came to check on her." Emma walked confidently toward the big male bear, and David started to follow her, but Marcus gently held him back. "Watch," Marcus said quietly. "Emma knows what she's doing." Emma approached the father bear and spoke to him in the same calm, confident voice she had used with the mother. "Your baby is hurt, Papa Bear, but the doctors are going to make him all better. Mama Bear did the right thing bringing him here." The father bear sniffed Emma gently, then looked over at his mate and cub. He seemed to be assessing the situation, deciding whether these humans could be trusted. Emma then did something that made everyone hold their breath. She walked over to Riley, who was still holding the cub, and gently took one of the little bear's paws in her small hand. "See, Papa Bear?" Emma said, holding up the cub's paw. "The baby is getting stronger. The nice nurse lady saved him." The father bear stood up and slowly approached Riley. The police officers tensed, and Officer Davis aimed his tranquilizer gun, but Dr. Walsh quickly stepped in front of him. "Don't," she said firmly. "He's not being aggressive. He's checking on his child." The massive bear came within arm's reach of Riley and gently sniffed his cub. The little bear made a soft sound, and the father responded with an even softer rumble. It was a sound of pure paternal love, and Riley felt her heart break with the beauty of it. The father bear then looked directly at Riley, and she saw something in his eyes that she would never forget. Gratitude, trust, and a father's desperate hope that she could save his child. "We need to move the cub inside now," Sarah said urgently. "The surgery can't wait much longer." Mrs. Patterson nodded. "Operating room 3 is ready, but how do we explain to the bears that we're taking their baby inside?" Emma looked up at the adults with the simple wisdom that only children possess. "You don't explain it with words," she said. "You show them." Emma walked to the hospital entrance and opened the door. She then returned to the mother bear and gently took her by the fur, leading her toward the building. The mother bear followed willingly, understanding that Emma was showing her where her cub would be taken for help. When they reached the glass doors of the hospital, Emma pointed inside and spoke to the bear. "Your baby will be in there, getting better. You can watch through the window and see that he's safe." The mother bear pressed her nose against the glass and looked inside. She could see the brightly lit hallway and the operating room where her cub would receive care. Emma then led the mother bear to a specific window, the one that looked directly into operating room 3. "You can watch from here," Emma explained. "You'll be able to see everything." The mother bear positioned herself at the window and sat down. She would wait there for however long it took. The father bear and the other family members took positions nearby, creating a protective circle around the hospital entrance. They weren't threatening anyone. They were simply showing that they would be watching and waiting for their family member to return. Riley carefully carried the cub toward the hospital entrance, with Tom and Sarah gathering their equipment to follow. The medical team was ready, and the operating room was prepared. But as they reached the door, the cub opened its eyes and looked at Riley one more time. In that look, Riley saw something that would stay with her forever. The little bear wasn't just trusting her with its life. It was trusting her with its family's heart. "Don't worry, little one," Riley whispered. "We're going to take very good care of you." As they entered the hospital, Riley could see the mother bear through the window, watching every step. The powerful animal's eyes never left her cub, and Riley knew that the next few hours would determine not just whether the little bear lived or died, but whether this incredible bond between species would be broken or made stronger. The surgery was about to begin, but Riley had the feeling that the real miracle had already happened. A wild family had trusted humans with their most precious gift, and humans had chosen compassion over fear. But the night was far from over, and Riley had no idea that the most shocking revelation was still to come. The surgery took 4 hours. 4 hours during which the mother bear never moved from her position at the window, watching every moment as Dr. Walsh, Tom, and Sarah worked to save her cub's life. The father bear and the other family members maintained their protective circle, occasionally making soft sounds to communicate with each other. Riley assisted throughout the entire operation, her nursing skills proving invaluable as they repaired internal damage that could have been fatal if left untreated. The cub was stronger than anyone had expected, fighting to survive with a determination that reminded Riley why she had chosen to help in the first place. Emma had curled up on a chair next to the window where the mother bear was watching, and had fallen asleep with her small hand pressed against the glass. The mother bear had gently placed her massive paw on the other side of the glass, creating a connection that made everyone who saw it stop and stare in wonder. As dawn began to break over the mountains, the surgery was finally complete. The cub's breathing was strong and steady, and its vital signs were stable. Dr. Walsh emerged from the operating room with tears in her eyes. "He's going to be fine," she announced to the waiting crowd. "Full recovery expected." The cheer that went up from the hospital staff was echoed by soft, huffing sounds from the bear family outside. Somehow, they seemed to understand that their little one had been saved. Riley carefully carried the sleeping cub back toward the entrance where the mother bear was waiting. As they approached the glass doors, the little bear opened its eyes and made a soft sound. The mother bear immediately responded with her own gentle call. "She wants to see her baby," Emma said, having woken up when she heard the good news. Mrs. Patterson, who had stayed throughout the entire night, made a decision that surprised everyone. "Open the doors," she said quietly. "Let her see her cub." The glass doors were opened, and the mother bear slowly approached. She sniffed her cub gently, and Riley could see the relief in the animal's eyes as she confirmed that her baby was alive and healing. The cub, though still weak from surgery, managed to nuzzle against its mother's nose. The reunion between mother and child brought tears to every human eye that witnessed it. But then something happened that no one had expected. The mother bear carefully picked up her cub, and instead of turning toward the forest, she carried the little one back to Riley. She gently placed the cub at Riley's feet and then did something extraordinary. She bowed her head. The massive, powerful animal lowered her head in what could only be described as a gesture of respect and gratitude. The father bear and the other family members did the same, creating a moment of profound connection between two species. Emma walked over to the mother bear and hugged her one last time. "Your baby is going to grow up big and strong," she whispered, "and he's going to remember that humans can be kind." The mother bear gently licked Emma's cheek, then picked up her cub and began walking toward the forest. The father bear and the rest of the family flanked them protectively as they made their way back to the wild. But at the edge of the parking lot, the mother bear stopped and turned back one last time. She looked directly at Riley and made a soft sound that seemed to carry across the morning air like a promise. Riley understood. The bear was saying that she would never forget. As the bear family disappeared into the forest, Riley felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Mrs. Patterson. "Riley," the administrator said quietly, "I owe you an apology, and I owe you a promotion. How would you feel about heading up our new wildlife emergency program?" Riley looked at her in surprise. "Wildlife emergency program?" Mrs. Patterson smiled. "After tonight, I think Pine Valley Pediatrics Center needs to be prepared for more unusual patients. And I can't think of anyone better to lead that program than the nurse who saved a bear cub's life." Dr. Walsh stepped forward. "I'd like to be part of that program too, if you'll have me." Tom and Sarah nodded their agreement. "We'll provide the veterinary support whenever you need it," Sarah added. Marcus wiped his eyes and grinned. "Best night shift I've ever worked." Emma tugged on Riley's scrubs and looked up at her with wise eyes. "The baby bear is going to have a good life now," she said confidently. "And someday, when he's all grown up, he might bring his own babies here if they need help." David Chen smiled at his daughter. "Emma has a way of predicting these things," he said. "She told me 3 days ago that something special was going to happen at the hospital." Riley knelt down to Emma's level. "How did you know?" Emma shrugged with the simple honesty of a child. "The animals told me in my dreams. They said a brave nurse was going to help save a baby, and that it would change everything." As the sun rose fully over Pine Valley, Riley looked around at the faces of her colleagues, at the forest where a bear family was safely returning home, and at the hospital that would never be quite the same again. The news crew had captured everything, and Riley knew that by evening the story would be broadcast around the world. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that when a desperate mother had asked for help, humans had chosen compassion over fear. What mattered was that a tiny bear cub would grow up healthy and strong because people had cared enough to save its life. And what mattered most of all was that Riley had learned something about herself that night. She had learned that sometimes the most important moments in life come not from the choices we plan to make, but from the choices we make when our hearts leave us no other option. 3 months later, Pine Valley Pediatrics Center received its first official wildlife patient through the new emergency program. A young deer with a broken leg, brought in by a park ranger who had heard about the place where they saved the bear cub. And 6 months after that, on a quiet spring evening, a familiar massive shape appeared at the edge of the parking lot. The mother bear had returned, but this time she wasn't alone. Walking beside her was a healthy, growing young bear, her cub, now strong and thriving. The mother bear sat at the edge of the forest for a few minutes, watching the hospital where her baby's life had been saved. Then she and her cub disappeared back into the wild, leaving behind only the memory of an incredible night when love had crossed every boundary that should have kept them apart. Riley, who had been working the evening shift that day, smiled as she watched them go. She had kept her promise to the mother bear, and the mother bear had kept her promise to Riley. Some bonds, Riley realized, are stronger than the differences between species. Some love is powerful enough to transform fear into trust, strangers into family, and ordinary nights into miracles that last a lifetime. The little bear would grow up wild and free, but he would carry with him always the memory of gentle human hands that had saved his life when his mother brought him to a place where compassion lived in the hearts of people who understood that every life, no matter how small, no matter how different, was worth saving. And in Pine Valley, whenever anyone told the story of the night a bear asked for help and humans said yes, it always ended the same way, with the reminder that the greatest healing happens not when we overcome our differences, but when we embrace the love that makes those differences disappear.